The house was worse than I expected. Even in daylight, the shadows clung to corners like thick, wet cloth, refusing to release the walls from their grip. I had rented it on impulse, a cheap escape from Los Angeles chaos. But there was something wrong, something I couldn't name. At first it was subtle. My footsteps echoed oddly, slower than they should, dragging across the old floorboards. The air smelled faintly of mildew and rust, and yet, underneath, something sweeter, almost like decay, had a scent of invitation. I unpacked quickly, trying to ignore the feeling of being watched. But that first night, the real terror began. The whisper was soft, almost polite. "Hello?" I called. Silence. Then the chair. One of the old wooden chairs had moved slightly, as if someone invisible had adjusted it. I laughed nervously, blaming the creaking floors. But laughter didn't help when the shadows seemed to shift unnaturally, pooling thicker in corners than they should. I noticed my reflection in a cracked mirror. At first, normal. Then, subtly. The eyes moved differently. The corners of my lips twitched when mine didn't. A soft breath fogged the glass, though the air was still. Suddenly I felt a presence behind me. A weight, pressing, almost tangible. My body froze. The whispers returned, threading under the door, crawling along the floor. "Leave. Leave." I turned sharply. Nothing. Only shadows, stretching and breathing, waiting. The lights flickered, then the room plunged into darkness. A soft giggle, childlike, echoed through the room. The shadows moved with purpose, pointing toward the hall. I tried to run, but the floorboards creaked under invisible weight, following me. Books fell off the shelves. A glass shattered. My heart hammered. I could feel fingers brushing against my skin. No one there. Then I saw it. A pale, indistinct figure in the corner. It had no face, yet I felt its gaze. Its form shifted as I blinked, sometimes taller than the ceiling, sometimes crouched on the floor. I screamed, stumbling back. "Sleep," it whispered. I ran to the door, but it slammed shut violently. The doorknob rattled. Panic overtook reason. My reflection in the mirror smiled. Blood streaked down its face. I backed away, slipping onto the floor. And then the voice. "Tomorrow you'll sleep deeper." I didn't know what it meant, but I knew somehow this was only the beginning. Morning came, but the sunlight brought no comfort. Shadows lingered stubbornly in corners thick and dark. The house seemed aware I had survived the night. I tried to eat, but my coffee tasted metallic, acrid, as if the house had poisoned even the simplest comfort. The reflection in the window. It wasn't mine. Hollow eyes stared back, silently mocking me. The hallway stretched unnaturally, bending like liquid. Each step echoed inconsistently, some behind me, some ahead. And then the child's giggle returned, low and insistent. "Come play." The whispers began. Not words, but names. My name, friends' names, faces I had never shared with anyone. They whispered, beckoned, demanded. I tried my phone. It was dead. No signal, no battery drain, nothing. Time distorted. The wall clock ran backward. Minutes vanished. The house wasn't just haunted, it was bending reality around me. I ran to the living room. Furniture shifted as if it had a mind. My favorite armchair faced a blank wall. A mirror hung where none should be, reflecting nothing. Or worse, everything. The shadows formed shapes. Faces, screams, unblinking eyes. A figure moved in the corner of my vision. Tall, faceless, flickering. My reflection in the window no longer mirrored me. It cried silently, blood streaking a face that looked too much like mine. Panic clawed at me. I tried doors, windows, anything. One room appeared empty, yet the floorboards bore footprints forming in dust decades old. My own, though I hadn't walked there. The whispers intensified, overlapping, chanting secrets only I knew. Every fear, every regret, Every shame I buried deep resurfaced in twisted, grotesque shapes projected on the walls. The house was alive. It remembered me. I fled upstairs, doors shifting, hallways twisting. The figure was there again, arms impossibly long, pointing. My reflection pleaded, "Don't let it take me." Then the walls groaned. The house itself seemed to pulse with anticipation. From above, the child's laughter multiplied, surrounding me, suffocating me with its eerie cadence. I fell into the armchair, trembling, hearing words form in shadows. "Tomorrow, we sleep together." The message wasn't a threat, it was a promise. The house wasn't done. It had begun a slow, patient claim on me, bending time, twisting space, and feeding on every hidden corner of my mind. I ran outside that morning, gasping sunlight like a drug, but even on the street, I felt it watching, waiting, and the faintest giggle echoed across the empty neighborhood. "Come play, tomorrow." That night, sleep was impossible. Every instinct screamed to stay awake, to cling to reality, but exhaustion dragged me down. When I finally succumbed, I awoke not in my bed, but in the living room. The house had changed. The walls pulsed, floorboards shifted beneath me, and shadows twisted into faces I recognized. Friends, neighbors, strangers, all frozen in silent screams. The child's giggle echoed, no longer playful, commanding and hungry. I tried doors, windows, anything to escape, but the house had become a labyrinth. Each step led to a room from my past, my childhood bedroom, my apartment in LA, places that should not exist here. Mirrors reflected versions of me I didn't recognize, eyes hollow, smiles cruel. A figure appeared, the faceless entity, impossibly tall, arms stretching unnaturally. I froze. It pointed, and I felt the weight of every secret, every regret, every hidden fear pressing down on me. The walls whispered, "You never left. You are part of us." I ran, but the house bent reality. Hallways elongated, ceilings lowered, shadows multiplied. Every object moved independently. Objects I had never owned twisted into grotesque forms. I could feel it. The house wasn't just alive. It was hungry, patient, shaping my mind to fit its will. Suddenly, the child's voice spoke clearly. "Do you remember your first night?" Yes. Every detail, the whispers, the moving furniture, the shadows, my reflection. I understood now. The house had been waiting, feeding on my fears, my memories, bending reality slowly, patiently. And now, I had become part of it. The entity advanced, and the air thickened. My body refused to move. Shadows coiled around me, filling every sense with darkness, yet I could see flashes of my life flickering in front of me, twisted and grotesque, feeding the entity further. Then the final twist. I awoke. Outside the house, sunlight streamed through the windows, everything seemingly normal. Relief surged, but the reflection in the window, it grinned, hollow-eyed, cruel, separate from me. The street, the sun, the world shimmered, distorted. My reflection stepped forward separate, smiling with knowledge I didn't have. The house's voice carried on the wind. "You are never leaving. You are already inside." I ran, but the whispers followed, omnipresent, inevitable. "Tomorrow, we sleep together." And I realized the ultimate horror. The house does not just haunt bodies, it haunts souls. I was no longer a visitor. I was its occupant. Forever. The graveyard was old, forgotten, and smelled of wet earth and dying flowers. My shovel scraped against the clay, a hollow, rhythmic sound that was the only company I had. I hated this job. It was a last resort, a way to put food on the table for my family back home, but the desperation in my gut was a constant cold ache. My boss, the old caretaker, had told me to leave the crypt of the Occult family alone. "Some graves are better left undisturbed," he'd mumbled, his eyes full of a fear I mistook for old age. But the Occults were buried with their wealth, and a single glimmering jewel I saw from a small crack in the marble crypt was calling my name. It was a small job, a few minutes of work, and I would have enough money to finally get out of this place. That was the lie I told myself. I pried open the heavy stone with a crowbar. A rush of cold air, so dense it felt physical, hit me. It wasn't just the cold of a tomb. It was an ancient cold, a cold that felt like it had been waiting. I leaned into the darkness, my headlamp cutting through the gloom. There it was. A skeletal hand, a ring with a single massive diamond on the wedding finger glinting in the weak light. The bone was thin and yellowed, but the ring was magnificent. I reached in, my fingers trembling as they closed around the bone. The cold was unbearable now, a sharp, biting pain that went straight to my arm. The ring was stuck. I gave a hard, desperate tug. The finger bone snapped with a sickening crack, and the ring slid free. I shoved it in my pocket, my heart hammering against my ribs, and quickly slid the marble back into place. My hands felt numb, but I told myself it was just the cold from the grave. I walked back towards the shed, the sound of my own footsteps seeming alien in the silent cemetery. The numbness in my fingers was spreading, a slow crawling sensation up my arm. I tried to flex my hand, but my fingers twitched uncontrollably, a jerky puppet-like movement that was not my own. A shiver ran through my entire body, a coldness that started deep in my bones. I glanced at my arm, and in the faint light of my headlamp I saw a thin, gray line stretching from my fingertips up to my wrist, like a vein of ash beneath my skin. My breath hitched in my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut, a panicked, silent prayer on my lips. This was a nightmare. This wasn't real. I just had to get back to my room, get some rest, and everything would be fine in the morning. When I opened my eyes, the gray line was at my elbow. The air around me felt thick, heavy, like the inside of a coffin. The gray line had reached my shoulder now, and my arm was completely numb, hanging uselessly at my side. I tried to move it, but it wouldn't respond. It felt like a foreign object, a dead weight attached to my body. Panic clawed at my throat, a silent scream trapped within. I had to get out of this graveyard. I had to get help. I started to run, my good arm pumping, my legs moving with a frantic energy fueled by pure terror. The headstones blurred into ghostly shapes in the darkness. The wind seemed to whisper my name, a cold, mocking sound that echoed the growing dread in my heart. The numbness was spreading further, a creeping paralysis that was slowly taking over. It had reached my neck. My jaw felt stiff, and it was becoming difficult to swallow. I stumbled, falling to my knees on the damp earth. My breath came in ragged gasps. I could feel it now, a cold presence coiling within me, like a snake made of ice. It wasn't just numbness. It was a taking over, an invasion. My own body was turning against me. I looked down at my hands. The skin was losing its color, turning a sickly pale gray, the same shade as the line that was now inching its way up my face. My fingers twitched again, but this time the movement was stronger, more deliberate. They curled into a claw-like shape, and a strange, alien sensation ran through them. A hunger that was not my own. A low, guttural sound escaped my throat, a sound I didn't recognize. It felt like something was trying to speak through me, something ancient and full of malice. My vision blurred at the edges, and I saw fleeting images in my mind's eye. A dark crypt, a decaying body, a look of cold fury. I tried to fight it, to scream, to move, but my body was no longer obeying my commands. It felt heavy, stiff, like rigor mortis had already begun to set in. The coldness intensified, and I felt a presence behind my eyes, a dark consciousness pushing its way to the forefront. My head slowly turned towards the darkness, and a chilling smile stretched across my lips, a smile I did not will. My own voice, but twisted, hollow, whispered in the silent graveyard. It's my turn now. My body was no longer my own. My mind, my consciousness. It was trapped inside a cold, unfeeling shell, a silent passenger forced to watch in horror. The icy presence had fully enveloped me. I could feel its thoughts now, cold and clear and filled with a hatred so profound it made my soul ache. It wasn't the rage of a ghost. It was the calculated fury of a thing that had waited for over 100 years. My legs, once clumsy and tired from digging, moved with a deliberate, purposeful grace. The entity piloting my body walked out of the graveyard, leaving the shovel and the open crypt behind. I tried to scream, to cry out for help, but my vocal cords were locked, my mouth a sealed tomb. I could only watch, a horrified witness to my own life ending. The entity's memories flooded my mind, a torrent of images, a courtroom, a flash of steel, a crowd of hateful faces. It had been framed for a crime it didn't commit, sentenced to be buried alive. The ring, the magnificent diamond ring, was not a symbol of wealth. It was a lock, a seal placed on its tomb to keep its vengeful spirit from escaping. And I, in my desperation and greed, had broken the seal. The entity had found its escape, its new vessel, and it was going home. My home. My body moved with a quiet, efficient pace through the sleeping town. The street lights cast long, broken shadows that danced like ghosts on the pavement. I knew what the entity was doing. I saw the images in my mind as it planned its revenge. My body, my hands, my voice would be used to find the descendants of the men who had wronged it. I was its puppet, its weapon. I had stolen its last belonging, and now it had taken everything I ever was. My legs climbed the front steps to my small house. I saw the light on in the window. My wife, my children, they were inside, waiting for me. I wanted to scream, to run, to warn them, but I was powerless. I was a ghost now, trapped inside my own flesh, my own tomb. The key slipped into the lock with a sickening click, and the door swung inward. The warmth of my home, the scent of my wife's perfume, the sound of my children's quiet breathing, all of it felt like an unbearable torture. I was home, but I was not me. My family was about to greet a monster wearing my face. My body took a silent step inside, and the ghost of the man who had been buried alive closed the door behind him. My life had ended, not in a crypt, but in my own home, in front of the people I loved most. And the worst part was, I was still there, trapped, forced to watch every single second of what was about to happen. I had never believed in haunted places until I arrived in that forgotten corner of New Mexico. The village seemed peaceful in daylight, but as the sun dipped behind the distant mesas, shadows began stretching unnaturally across the cracked streets. My job had brought me here, but curiosity, or foolishness, led me to the abandoned library at the edge of town. The doors creaked when I pushed them open. Dust rose like living clouds. Shelves towered above me, some leaning as if listening. I ran my fingers over the spines, feeling a subtle vibration, like the books themselves were breathing. Then I noticed the first anomaly. The pages of an open book shimmered with symbols I didn't recognize. When I leaned closer, the words blurred and twisted into images of me, my childhood fears, secrets I had never spoken, memories I had tried to bury. A soft, almost melodic whisper echoed, "You shouldn't be here." I spun around. Nothing, just shadows stretching along the walls, moving as if alive. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. The temperature dropped, my breath fogging in the stale air. I wanted to leave, but the library seemed to stretch infinitely, corridors bending in impossible ways. Every door I tried led me back to the same central hall. I felt a presence behind me, and for a brief moment, I swore I saw my reflection in a cracked mirror. Not me, but someone with hollow eyes watching. Then the books began to fall. Not randomly, each one flapped open like wings, revealing images of my deepest fears. A faceless shadow slid across the floor, and I realized it was not just a figure. It was made of the darkness itself, drawn from my own thoughts. I stumbled back, tripping over a pile of old newspapers. The whispers multiplied, layered into dozens of voices, my own name, my parents, my mistakes. And from the darkest corner a child's laugh echoed, light yet malicious. "Come play." I ran, barely escaping through the library doors, gasping under the dim moonlight. My heart screamed at me that the library was alive, and it had taken note of me. And then I heard it, carried on the wind. "Tomorrow, you will return." Morning brought no relief. The streets looked normal, almost mundane, but my mind felt trapped. Shadows clung to corners as if mocking me. Even in the sunlight, I felt the library's presence lingering in the air. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was imagination. But when I passed the old town square, I glimpsed figures that weren't there before, faceless, shifting, just beyond focus. Their movements synchronized with my heartbeat. My reflection in a cracked storefront window moved differently, smiling when I didn't. That night I returned. I couldn't resist the pull. The library's whispering seemed to seep into my very bones. As I entered, the door slammed shut behind me. I was trapped. The hallways twisted in ways impossible for any building. Shelves extended endlessly, books hovering inches from the floor, revealing images that weren't printed, memories of my past, every lie I'd told, every fear I'd hidden. I tried to leave, but the floor beneath me shifted. Shadows slithered, reaching toward me like tendrils. My reflection appeared again, in a standing mirror that had not existed minutes before. It mouthed words I couldn't hear, eyes wide and pleading. Then the whispering multiplied, dozens of voices layering into one cacophony. It called out my name, my family's, old friends. Every mistake, every regret, every hidden thought had been collected and displayed before me. I felt the walls closing in. From a corner emerged a child-shaped shadow, tilting its head unnaturally. Its laugh echoed through every room simultaneously, joyful yet cruel. "Come play. Stay forever," it whispered. Panic surged. I ran down endless corridors, doors folding into walls, staircases looping back on themselves. Every time I thought I escaped, I found myself back in the central hall. And there, the library's heart, a dark, pulsing space almost alive, breathing in my fear. Collapsing to my knees, I realized the truth. This library didn't just contain books, it contained me. Every fear, every secret, every memory. It had been feeding, shaping, twisting reality to trap me. A soft, chilling voice floated from above. "Tomorrow, you belong to us." I couldn't sleep that night. My mind raced, haunted by shadows, whispers, and the child's laugh. Exhaustion dragged me down, but the fear kept me awake. When I finally closed my eyes, I awoke. Not in my bed, but back inside the library. The air was heavier now, shelves bent unnaturally, stretching into darkness, casting moving shadows that weren't mine. Books hovered, opening on their own, revealing images of me I had never seen. My deepest fears, failures, and regrets manifested in words and pictures. I tried the doors. Locked. The hallways twisted endlessly. Every step echoed inconsistently. Shadows moved in impossible ways, growing taller, coiling like snakes around me. My reflection appeared again, separate, whispering words I couldn't understand, mouth forming syllables that made my chest ache. Then the child's shadow emerged, taller, wider, eyes hollow but gleaming. Its laugh surrounded me, reverberating through walls, floors, and ceiling. "Play, forever," it commanded. I ran blindly, but the library bent reality. Staircases looped, doors swallowed themselves, and the floors became liquid, pulling me down. Every memory, every hidden thought, every fear I had was being dragged into this darkness, feeding the entity alive within the walls. Suddenly, I glimpsed the doorway outside. Sunlight beckoned. Relief surged. I ran, bursting through the doors. But the street was distorted. The town shimmered unnaturally. Shadows lurked in alleys, faces I recognized twisted into hollow grins. And my reflection in the glass? Not mine. Hollow-eyed, cruel, and smiling. A whisper floated on the wind. "You are already inside." I screamed, but the voice followed, omnipresent. "Tomorrow, we sleep together." And then I understood the ultimate horror. The library didn't just haunt bodies or minds. It claimed souls. Every secret, every fear, every regret had become part of it, and I was no longer a visitor. I had become its occupant, forever. I first heard about Hollow Creek Station from Thomas, whose brother Kyle vanished there one frigid December night. Thomas's hands shook as he spoke, and I could hear the tension in his voice. He swore every word was true. Kyle had arrived at the deserted platform shortly after midnight. The station stretched endlessly under flickering fluorescent lights, shadows moving in impossible ways. At first, he thought he was imagining it, the way the beams of light bent unnaturally, the strange, shifting reflections in puddles. But then he saw it. A figure stood near the far end of the platform. It was humanoid, but wrong. Limbs that bent at impossible angles, a face blurred like smoke, and eyes glowing faintly, coals smoldering in the darkness. Kyle froze. His heartbeat pounded in his ears louder than the empty echoes of his footsteps. The wind whispered his name, soft at first. Kyle. Then louder, urgent, insistent. Kyle. The puddles around him rippled unnaturally, and in each reflection, dozens of shadowy figures writhed, stretching, whispering, staring. The first train whistle blew, echoing oddly, as though coming from beneath the tracks. Kyle tried to move forward to get closer to the exit, but the platform seemed to fold in on itself. Every step he took brought him back to the same spot. The shadow figure mirrored him, tilting its head, curling its elongated fingers floating slightly above the ground. Then the reflection in the station glass shifted. Kyle saw himself, grinning, hollow-eyed, whispering words he didn't recognize. He spun around. The figure was closer now, not moving like normal motion, but as if the darkness itself was bending, crawling toward him. Thomas's voice dropped when he recounted it. He tried to run, Elliot. Every corner he turned, the platform stretched, the tracks twisted, wrapping around him. And that figure, it wasn't alone. The shadows multiplied, slithering along the edges of the platform, just at the edge of his vision. Kyle's panic escalated. He could feel a presence brushing against his skin, not physical but pressing, suffocating, invasive. Every sound was distorted. The station groaned. The wind whispered secrets. Distant footsteps echoed that were not his own. And then the lights flickered and went out. Total darkness. Just the whispers, the laughter, the coiling shadows around him, and the glow of the figure's eyes, brighter now, reflecting 1,000 tiny versions of him, screaming silently. Thomas paused. He said, "It felt like the station was alive, breathing, watching, waiting. I don't know how he made it through that first night, Elliot, but he never came back the same." Thomas's voice was quieter this time, almost a whisper. "Kyle thought he could escape," he said. "But Hollow Creek Station doesn't work like that. It moves. It shifts. It watches." Kyle ran, desperate, following the platform's edge, but every step distorted reality around him. Corners stretched impossibly, corridors folded back on themselves, and the distant train on the opposite track seemed closer with each blink of his eyes. From its windows, shadows pressed against the glass, dozens, maybe hundreds, all moving as one. Some resembled people he knew, others grotesque, malformed shapes that writhed and twisted in ways human eyes weren't meant to perceive. The wind carried whispers, overlapping layered voices speaking in distorted tones. "You shouldn't be here. You cannot leave. We know." Kyle stumbled into a dark corridor behind the ticket booth. The walls seemed alive, breathing, pulsing, Faces moved within the plaster, mouths opening and closing in unison, screaming silently. He tried to cover his ears, but the voices entered his mind anyway, growing louder with every heartbeat. When he returned to the platform, the train loomed impossibly close. Its length defied logic, stretching beyond the tracks, the shadows inside multiplying, pressing forward like they could reach him through the steel and glass. The conductor's face appeared at one window, pale, featureless, yet somehow knowing. Kyle froze. The train didn't move, yet the shadows seeped outward, extending tendrils along the rails, reaching toward him like smoke, curling, reaching. Then Kyle heard the sound that made him wish he could vanish. His own name, whispered from every direction, not just outside, but inside his mind. Kyle. Kyle. The platform itself seemed to pulse with the rhythm of his panic, walls bending, floor stretching and contracting. Every attempt to escape only brought him back to the same spot, every shadow figure moving closer, just at the corner of vision, always there, but never fully revealed. Thomas paused, his breath catching. He tried to call out, but his voice, it didn't belong to him anymore. It came out hollow, warped, repeating things he didn't remember saying. And the reflection in the puddles. Elliot. It wasn't him. Not really. It grinned. Hollow eyes. And then it spoke. You belong here. Kyle ran blindly down the corridor, walls pressing inward, shadows twisting from corners, floor vibrating beneath his feet. The train whistle blew again, but it was wrong. Long, distorted, carrying the echoes of hundreds of whispers, the chorus of shadow figures who now seemed to know him intimately. Every misstep, every faltering breath, brought the station closer, wrapping around him, suffocating, bending reality until he could no longer tell where he ended and the station began. Thomas's final words in that part chilled me. I don't know how long he lasted. He vanished into the station that night. Hollow Creek remembered him, and it waits. Elliot. It waits for the next one. Thomas's hands shook when he told me this part. Kyle thought he saw the exit, he whispered. A faint light, a door at the end of the corridor. But it wasn't real. Hollow Creek doesn't allow escape. The corridor stretched endlessly, walls pulsing like living tissue. Shadows curled along the edges, moving independently of the light, growing taller, denser, whispering his name, chanting in overlapping voices. Kyle ran, desperate, his footsteps swallowed by the station's unnatural acoustics. Every time he tried to reach the door, it vanished or folded into the walls, replaced by endless darkness. He could feel them then, the shadows, licking at his skin, brushing against him, cold and viscous, pressing through every sense. His own reflection appeared on every surface. Windows, puddles, metallic signs, grinning, hollow-eyed, whispering, "You belong here." Kyle's panic escalated. The train on the far track loomed impossibly large, windows filled with countless distorted faces, some familiar, some grotesque, all staring. Tendrils of darkness extended from the train, merging with the shadows around him, reaching, curling, wrapping like serpents. He screamed, but his voice came out as a distorted echo, repeating words he hadn't spoken, repeating regrets, memories he tried to forget. The station itself seemed to inhale, folding the platform, stretching the rails, pulling him closer to the train. Every direction he turned led him back to the same impossible spot. The whispers became a chorus, 1,000 voices, chanting his guilt, his fear, his secrets. And then, the reflection in the glass smiled wider than any human smile, eyes hollow, teeth sharp, stretching unnaturally. The voice came again, this time in unison with all the shadows, all the reflections, every whisper. "Welcome home." Kyle's last thought, as Thomas said, was of disbelief, of horror, of helplessness. And then he vanished. Not a body, not a scream, just gone. The station pulsed once more, quieted and waited. Thomas warned me, his voice trembling. It remembers him. It knows him. And Elliot, it will remember you too. Even now, when I pass a dark, empty platform, I feel the shadows creeping along the rails, waiting, watching. Hollow Creek Station does not forget, and it never lets go.